Welcome to the deep dive. We take a deep dive into the source material. Today, you sent us a lecture on lipids. I gotta admit, when I first saw it, I thought, another lecture about eating right. But I started digging into this lecture, and I realized there's way more to this cholesterol thing than just like good and bad levels.
Yeah, you can really get caught up in those numbers on a blood test. But cholesterol itself is pretty fascinating. It's got such a diverse role in our bodies.
This lecture really emphasized that, didn't it? It's not just about keeping our arteries clean. It's actually crucial, like you said, for all sorts of biological processes.
Totally. When we think about its role in our bodies, we've got to think about its structure. It's a sterol, a type of lipid, and that's why it's so versatile.
Wait, hold on. Sterol lipid. My brain might need a little refresher here. I know I'm not the only one.
You got it. So lipids, those are fats, oils, and waxes. And then sterols are a lipid with a ring structure. Cholesterol is a sterol. And that structure is what lets it play so many different roles.
So it's a bit like cholesterol has its own Swiss Army knife of functions.
That's a great analogy. One of its biggest roles is as a building block for cell membranes. Keeps those membranes strong, keeps them fluid so the cells can work right.
So it's not just about the structure, it's about making sure they actually work.
Exactly. It's also a key component of the myelin sheath. That fatty layer that insulates nerve fibers helps those signals transmit in our nervous system.
Like the insulation around electrical wires.
You got it.
Makes sense. The lecture notes said it's in the brain, nerve tissues, the liver, and bile salts even.
It's everywhere. Works behind the scenes to keep everything going, even in vitamin D.
Really?
Yeah. When sunlight hits your skin, it converts that cholesterol into vitamin D.
Okay, so we got builder, insulator, vitamin factory, anything else this cholesterol can do.
Well, one of the coolest things is that it's a precursor to hormones.
Hold on, you're saying that the same molecule that's building my cells is also involved in my mood swings and my energy levels?
Exactly. It's the starting point for steroid hormones like testosterone, estrogen, cortisol. These hormones, well, they're involved in everything: growth, development, stress response, reproduction.
This is wild. It's not just some passive molecule. It's active in all these processes.
It is. And the more we dig into this lecture, we'll see even more examples of its role, like digestion, cell signaling.
Cell signaling. Intriguing. What's that all about?
Imagine a city. Tons of information has to move around fast.
Right.
That's kind of what happens in our bodies on a cellular level.
Yeah.
And cholesterol makes sure those messages get where they need to go.
Okay, I'm hooked. Let's dig into that. But first, we should probably talk about how cholesterol even travels in the bloodstream. That's where this whole good and bad cholesterol thing comes in, right?
Yeah, cholesterol can't dissolve in the blood on its own. It uses these carriers, lipoproteins.
Like delivery trucks.
Exactly. There are two main types, LDL and HDL. LDL, or low-density lipoprotein, is often called the bad cholesterol because if you have high levels, it can lead to plaque buildup in your arteries.
Ah, I see the traffic jam analogy. And HDL is the good guy, right? Cleans things up.
Right. HDL, or high-density lipoprotein, that's the good cholesterol. It removes excess cholesterol from your body, helps prevent those blockages.
So it's not that cholesterol itself is bad, it's all about which lipoprotein it's hanging out with.
Exactly. This lecture really emphasizes that we got to look beyond simple labels. It's all about the nuances.
This deep dive's changing how I think about cholesterol. It's more than just a number on a test.
It really is. And as we keep going with this lecture, we're going to see more examples of its complexity.
I'm excited to dive deeper, especially that cell signaling thing. But there was another type of lipid that caught my eye, glycerophospholipids. What are they all about?
Glycerophospholipids are a big part of cell membranes, along with cholesterol. They provide structure and control what enters and exits the cell. But the really cool part is their role in cell signaling pathways.
Wait, so they're not just sitting there in the membrane, they're actually talking to other cells.
That's right. They're involved in all kinds of things: cell growth, survival, movement, immune responses. Think of them as messengers, helping cells coordinate their activities.
Okay, so we've got cholesterol, the builder, the hormone precursor, and now we have glycerophospholipids acting as tiny messengers. This is getting more complex and more exciting by the minute.
It is. And it just goes to show how interconnected all these different types of lipids are, constantly interacting, keeping our bodies functioning properly.
It's like uncovering a hidden network within our bodies, this secret language that controls so much.
And we're just getting started on understanding this language. There's so much more to learn about the roles of lipids in health and disease. But before we go any further, I think we need to bring in another key player in this lipid drama Sphingolipids.
Sphingolipids. Now, that's a name I haven't heard before. What are they, and how do they fit into this already complex picture?
They're fascinating. Like we were saying, they're found in cell membranes, but their structure is unique. It lets them play very specific roles.
Yeah, the lecture mentioned something about cell recognition. Can you tell me more about that?
Imagine your cells have like special ID badges so they can recognize each other. Sphingolipids are like those badges. They help cells recognize each other, interact, make sure everything's running smoothly.
So they're like the security guards, making sure only the right cells get in.
That's a great way to think about it. They're also involved in regulating cell growth, death, and even immune responses.
Wow, so they're not just gatekeepers, they're involved in some pretty serious stuff. But the lecture also mentioned that if sphingolipid metabolism gets disrupted, it can cause diseases. What did it say about that?
Yeah, if the levels get out of whack, it's been linked to a bunch of conditions like cancer, neurodegenerative diseases, even infections.
That's scary. It really makes you think about how important these little molecules are for our health.
Definitely. And that's why this whole field of lipidomics is getting so much attention these days. Scientists are realizing that lipids are way more than just fat. They're key in tons of cellular processes.
Lipidomics, that's the study of all lipids, right? Not just cholesterol.
Exactly. It's a pretty new field, but it's growing fast as researchers learn more and more about what lipids do, how they keep us healthy, and how they can make us sick.
What are some of the things that lipidomics researchers are looking into right now?
Well, they're looking at how lipids are made, how they're broken down, how they interact with other molecules in the cell. And of course, they're trying to understand how changes in those lipid levels can contribute to diseases.
Makes sense. It seems like if we can understand lipids better, we could diagnose, treat, and maybe even prevent diseases in totally new ways.
Absolutely. There's already some evidence that by targeting specific lipids, we could treat things like cancer and heart disease more effectively.
That's amazing. It feels like we're on the edge of a whole new era of medicine, one that recognizes how essential lipids are for good health.
I think so too. We're moving past that idea that fats are bad. We're finally seeing that lipids are actually super important for our well-being.
This deep dive has really been eye-opening. But before we get lost in the future of lipidomics, I wanted to circle back to something you mentioned earlier about cholesterol's role in digestion.
Right. Cholesterol is a big part of bile acids. Those are produced in the liver and stored in the gallbladder.
Bile acids, they help us break down fats, right?
Yep. They basically act like detergents and emulsify fats in the small intestine. That way, your body can absorb them.
So no cholesterol, no cheeseburgers. That's an important job.
It is. Another example of how cholesterol keeps us healthy, even though it has this bad reputation.
This deep dive has totally changed how I think about cholesterol. But speaking of bad reputations, I'm still a little confused about why cholesterol gets such a bad rap. I mean, we've talked about how important it is for so many things. Why all the negativity?
That's a great question. I think part of it is that, like a lot of things in life, too much of a good thing can be bad.
So it's not that cholesterol itself is bad, it's just that we need to keep it in check.
Exactly. Like we were saying earlier, too much LDL cholesterol can clog up your arteries, and that can increase your risk of heart disease.
Right, those bad cholesterol delivery trucks causing a traffic jam.
That's the one.
Yeah.
But the important thing is that cholesterol isn't the enemy. It's all about maintaining a healthy balance.
So we need to be aware of our cholesterol levels, but we shouldn't think of it as this evil thing.
Exactly. And this is where understanding lipoproteins and how our body processes lipids becomes so important. You got to look beyond the total cholesterol number and understand the different types and how they affect our health.
Makes sense. It's like judging a book by its cover. We need to look deeper and see the complexity of cholesterol and how it works in our bodies.
Couldn't agree more. And that takes us back to this amazing world of lipids in general. The more we uncover these interactions and their impact on our health, the better we'll get at staying healthy.
This deep dive has really opened my eyes to this vast world of lipids. They're not just passive things sitting in our cells. They're dynamic, active, and they orchestrate the symphony of activities that keeps us alive.
Well said. And the lecture actually gave us a good example of how we can manage our cholesterol naturally. Remember reading about plant sterols and stanols?
Vaguely. They're in some foods, right?
Yep. Plant sterols and stanols are compounds that you find in plants. They have a really similar structure to cholesterol.
Oh, so are they like cholesterol imposters?
You could say that.
Yeah.
Because they have such similar structures, they can actually compete with cholesterol to be absorbed in your gut.
So if you eat foods with these plant sterols and stanols, you can lower your LDL cholesterol naturally.
That's the idea. The lecture even mentioned a specific product called Benecol, which is a stanol ester spread that's been shown to be effective.
Benical. I think I've seen that at the store. So all this knowledge about cholesterol isn't just theoretical. It can actually help us make good choices about our diet.
Exactly. That's why it's so cool to dive deep into these topics. We learn how our bodies work and how we can stay healthy.
It's been amazing so far, and we've covered so much. We talked about cholesterol in cell membranes, how it makes hormones, how it helps with digestion. We even looked at lipid signaling and those lipoproteins. And then there's those plant sterols and stanols, nature's cholesterol busters.
Great summary. It's clear that lipids, which people usually think of as just bad fat, are actually essential for life. They do so much in our bodies.
And we learned that nature gives us some pretty cool ways to manage our cholesterol, like those plant sterols and stanols.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But before we move on from this lipid adventure, I want to bring up snake venom again. We talked about it briefly earlier.
Oh, yeah. The lecture said that some snake venoms have these enzymes called phospholipases, right?
That's right. And these enzymes actually target lipids, specifically the phospholipids in cell membranes.
So snake venom attacks the very structure of our cells.
Kinda, yeah. Phospholipids mess up the cell membranes, which can cause a whole bunch of bad things.
That's kind of scary and super interesting at the same time. It really shows how important lipids are for us to survive.
Definitely. And it proves that we can't just look at lipids on their own. We need to think about them in the context of all these complex interactions, both inside our bodies and in the world around us.
This deep dive has been wild. We started with cholesterol as a building block, and now we're talking about how it makes hormones, helps us digest, and can even be targeted by snake venom. It's amazing how something we usually think of as bad, like cholesterol, is actually so important for staying healthy.
It really shows how complex and connected all the systems in our bodies are, and it reminds us that we need to look past those simple labels and really dig into the amazing world of science.
I completely agree. This deep dive has taught me so much. I'm sure our listeners are feeling just as enlightened and blown away as I am. But hold on, we're not done yet. There's one more super interesting thing from this lecture that we need to talk about. Cholesterol's role in multiple sclerosis.
Ah, yes, multiple sclerosis, or MS. It's a complex neurological disorder that involves damage to the myelin sheath, which, as we know, is full of lipids, including cholesterol.
Right. That protective coating around nerve fibers that helps them send signals efficiently, like the insulation on electrical wires.
Exactly. And in MS, the immune system goes haywire and attacks the myelin sheath, which disrupts the nerve impulses and causes all kinds of neurological symptoms.
So is the breakdown of this lipid-rich structure basically the root of the problem in MS?
It's a major factor, that's for sure. And it shows how important it is to understand lipid metabolism when we're talking about different diseases.
This deep dive has taken us on quite a ride. We started with the simple structure of cholesterol, and now we've seen how it plays a role in making hormones, helping with digestion, and even how it's a target for snake venom. We've also learned about lipoproteins, those cholesterol chauffeurs, and how crucial other lipids are, like glycerophospholipids and sphingolipids. And let's not forget those plant sterols and stanols, nature's very own cholesterol fighters.
You've done a fantastic job summing up everything. It's clear that lipids, which a lot of people think of as bad fats, are actually essential for life and play all sorts of roles in keeping our bodies running smoothly.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener when it comes to this often overlooked world of lipids. We've learned that cholesterol is way more than just a number on a blood test. It's a super important building block. It helps make hormones, it helps with digestion, and it can even be targeted by snake venom. We also dug into lipid signaling, those tiny messengers that keep our cells talking to each other, and we explored the connections between lipids and diseases like multiple sclerosis. And on top of all of that, we found out that nature gives us its own ways to fight cholesterol with plant sterols and stanols.
It's been an incredible journey, and I hope our listeners are excited to learn even more about these amazing molecules.
I have a feeling this is just the start of our lipid adventures. But for now, we'll have to leave you with a question to think about. If cholesterol is so important, why does it have such a bad reputation? We encourage you to ponder that and keep exploring the awesome world of lipids. Until next time, keep diving deep.
Man, what a journey. It's like we went from cholesterol 101 to like a PhD level class on lipids, all in like an hour.
We really did cover a lot, didn't we? Starting with the basics of cholesterol and to all these complex roles it plays in our cells, how it helps us make hormones, how we even digest food, and even how it's a target for snake venom. It's pretty wild when you think about it. Lipids are way more fascinating than people think.
It really hit me how connected everything is. We started with just cholesterol, then boom, glycerophospholipids, sphingolipids, lipoproteins, even plant sterols. It's like our bodies have this whole little world inside them, all these lipids working together. And just like any ecosystem, it needs balance. If you get too much or too little of a specific lipid, things can go wrong. And that can lead to health problems. That's where lipidomics is so important. It helps us understand how all these pieces fit together and how they affect how healthy we are.
You know what? When I first saw the title of this lecture, lipids, I have to admit, I was like, ugh, really? But now, I'm hooked. It's like this whole secret world I never knew existed.
That's the best part about science, isn't it? Finding these hidden systems that make our bodies tick and realizing there's still so much to learn.
Speaking of learning, the thing that surprised me the most was that connection between lipids and multiple sclerosis. I had no clue that damage to the myelin sheath, which is full of lipids, was such a big deal in this disease.
It really shows you how important lipids are for our brains and nerves to work properly. That myelin sheath is like insulation, It helps signals travel smoothly. If it gets damaged, the communication gets all messed up, and that can cause all sorts of neurological problems.
Makes you realize how fragile our bodies are and how much those lipids matter, for good and for bad.
Absolutely. And as we learn more about lipidomics, we're likely to find even more links between these lipid imbalances and all kinds of diseases. That's going to be huge for figuring out new ways to diagnose, treat, and prevent those diseases.
What are some of the hot topics in lipidomics research right now? I'm really curious.
One of the most exciting areas is lipid signaling. We touched on it a little, but it's a huge and super complex field. Scientists are discovering that lipids aren't just sitting there in our cells. They're like these little messengers that play a big part in controlling all these different processes in the cells.
So it's not just about how much of each lipid we have, it's about how they talk to each other and interact in our bodies.
You got it. And these lipid signals are involved in so much. They affect how cells grow, how they die, how our immune system works, even inflammation. By understanding these pathways, scientists are hoping to design new drugs that can zero in on specific lipid signals and fix those imbalances that cause disease.
It sounds like we're on the verge of a whole new era in medicine, one that understands the importance of lipids and uses them to help us heal.
I think you're right. And it's all thanks to all those researchers who are pushing the boundaries of what we know about these super important molecules.
This deep dive has really been a game changer for me. I went from not caring about lipids at all to being totally fascinated by them. It's crazy how something we take for granted, like fats, are so important for our health and well-being.
It just goes to show you there's a whole world of wonder, even at the microscopic level. And the more we learn about these tiny hidden systems, the more we can appreciate the beauty of how life works.
That's so true. So to everyone listening who's still thinking, oh, lipids, who cares? Think again. These molecules are way more than just fat. They're literally the building blocks of our cells, the messengers that keep our bodies going, and the key to understanding a lot of health issues.
And if you're looking for ways to be healthier, remember that knowledge is power. The more you know about how your body works, the better you can take care of yourself through your diet, lifestyle, everything.
This deep dive has given us so much to think about.